Welcome back to the Atma Paradigm, and today is the final session of part 4 of our series, which has been entitled The Universe and Beyond. And it's indeed the final session in this whole webinar series. So we reach the point where we are now to consider the absolute truth. Now I use that term absolute truth not in the sense that this is something that I'm telling you that you have to believe as an absolute fact, but absolute truth as a concept in philosophy, in particularly in the Vedantic sense, that the absolute truth is the ultimate source of all existence. Now this is a deeper insight than I kind of explained from the phrase I quoted last week from the Vedanta Sutra, Janma Jasya Yataha. This time we're taking from that same sutra the meaning that the absolute truth is that from which everything else emanates, or upon which it rests. And this concept that there is a kind of a single principle or a unifying cause of all that is significant and particularly pertinent to our analysis of existence beyond the universe. And I do mention that today, as we explore this topic, because it's the final session, it's almost like, you know, the wrap-up of the season finale. It might go a little longer than the usual. So I hope that you'll remain gripped until the end. So our analysis has given us a picture. A picture has emerged that consciousness in its free state retains the features that we have identified. That we identified. So these are the features that we identified for consciousness when it is embodied within the universe. Although within the universe, those features may be covered or not fully displayed. These features included being fully conscious, rather than going through periods of kind of seeming unconsciousness and deep sleep blackout as we do in the embodied state. The next one was it's non-temporal, meaning that it exists outside of time, and then that it retains its sense of an individual unit of consciousness, something that might seem a surprise to those who think that free consciousness is a sort of merged state involving the loss or dissolution of any sense of individuality. No, we're saying that in the free state, the Atma retains its individual conscious identity. Next is that it's cognizant, in that the free conscious entity undergoes the experiences of thought, emotions, and sensations, but in a way that is direct and doesn't rely on a body, senses, and a mind to mediate those experiences. And the next is that the Atma is a source of will, retaining the wish to vary the content of our experiences. But again, with this important difference, that the quality of our willing and intentions in the free state is very different to the sort of self-centered intentions that we have in the embodied state. And in the free state, we have the ability to perceive forms and other perceptual qualities. And we presented the case that forms and qualities must be features of the world of consciousness, the free state of consciousness, and are imported by consciousness and imposed upon the kind of formless amorphous state of matter in order to replicate the ideal forms of the Brahman state. So we kind of discuss this as the physical world and its forms as the kind of reflection of the real tree that we are seeing in the reflection of the water. So following on from that, we suggested that consciousness possesses form, or rather that it is or manifests itself as a form, and that form is one that is suited to its contemplation and intentions. This provides a plausible explanation why consciousness should feel so attracted and enticed to have and to inhabit a biological form in the cosmic existence. So we refer to this natural form of the Atma using the term vigraha. And consciousness uses its form to engage in activities. And I explained that both in the universe and in the free state, it is intention that produces change in what we experience. So within the universe of prakritic matter, our intention is facilitated by time. Time enables the information content of matter to be changed and updated, And thus this creates the experience for us of the passing of time, or that we are experiencing a changing world. But in the state of free consciousness, intention produces change directly. And this is a level of freedom and agency far beyond the capabilities of ourselves when we're in the embodied state. And such freedom is the prerogative of free consciousness, because of the trusted intention of each Atma in the free state, that intention being directed to the enhancement of enjoyment for other beings, for other Atmas. And those Atmas are within kind of various networks of kind of loving exchanges and relationships. And we made the point that if the qualification within an enlightenment process, say yoga, is to achieve absolute oneness of interests and empathy and identification with all other consciousness, well, if you've reached that level of unity of intention, well, the logical progression is then to express such love within those relationships by actively promoting further enjoyment together with one another. This is all helpful, this analysis of the different features in the free state. It gives us a sense of the context of consciousness in the free state of Brahman. But all of the features that we identified within consciousness, as expressed in the conditioned state within the universe, exist as ideal or perfected attributes of the Atmas in this free state. So altogether, these attributes of the free state are a manifestation of the essential nature of consciousness as Sat, being, Chit, which we refer to as the attribute of knowing, Ananda, the attribute and feature of loving, and Vigraha, which last week I translated as doing. But because it is doing things in relation to other conscious entities, it's more appropriate to recognize that this facet of consciousness, manifest by having form, Vigraha, exists to enhance the quality of our interactions, taking them from the conceptual level of just identification as, fellow conscious beings, taking them from that level to the active, participative exchange of activities. Now, English doesn't have an exact or really a word that I think is particularly suitable. But serving helps to cover the idea of wanting to please and being willing to act to increase the enjoyment of others. Of course, that is not serving because it's paid or because it's obliged. It's loving service. To understand this in full context, we're going to have to consider the relationships that connect the various components of reality we have talked about so far. And that brings us to our discussion, and how we're going to enter this discussion on the absolute truth. So, one of the components we have, consciousness. This is consciousness in terms of the total of all Atmas. Some of them of which are in the free state, and some of them are linked with Prakriti, meaning that they're involved in taking bodies and exploring life in the kind of virtual reality game world of the physical universe. No, we're not saying that we live in a simulation, we live in a real world, but we experience it like we might a VR game. But Atmas are Atmas. They are the same wherever they are, whether in the free state or in the universe. The Atmas are the same. The difference is in the freedom and the potency of their own agency and the expression of their intentions, and also in the quality of their experiences. So, though we say there is individuality of each Atma, there is this unity of quality of all conscious entities. They are all got the same qualities as Sat, Chit, Ananda, Vigraha entities. So that covers that component of reality, consciousness as the Atmas. Now, what about the stuff that seems to be very different from consciousness? The Prakriti, the material stuff that makes up the universes. Is this just a real stark dualism between these two? And we have to ask this question. Are they both real? That's where we're going to start. And in our analysis so far, we've always refuted the idea that consciousness is unreal. But we've also refuted the idea that Prakriti is unreal. So, both Prakriti and consciousness are real components of reality. So in this way, the Atma Paradigm kind of matches one of the key Vedantic schools of thought, which is the Vaishnava Vedanta. And the view of Vaishnava Vedanta does differ from the Advaita Vedanta interpretation. Advaita monism tries to remove Prakriti from the ontological picture by suggesting it doesn't and maybe never really existed other than as an apparent illusion. Now, we've talked about this. It's a fudge. This kind of concept of a oneness that produces an illusion does not explain the illusory power something that supposedly non-existent has over consciousness, and particularly over unified oneness consciousness. So for the Atma Paradigm, both consciousness and the Prakriti universes are real. And our axiom is that we exist as a real thing, and we are shown to be conscious entities beyond time and matter. But if matter and the universe were not also real, then they couldn't provide the type of conditioned experience that we're currently undergoing. So the forms and circumstances we might incur during life within the universe may be transitory and sort of ephemeral, they come and go, but the reality that underpins that experience must be real stuff. It's like our VR analogy. Our experiences within the game might be virtual and illusory, but it takes a lot of computing reality to create such virtual experiences. Now, if we accept that there are these two distinct aspects of reality, the question must come, how are they related? Some philosophers suggest that this might be all that exists, the aggregate of consciousness and the universe. But that doesn't really work out. Vedanta analyzes it like this and says, well, Prakriti cannot manifest itself. And we've kind of come to that conclusion ourselves. And Prakriti cannot manifest consciousness. We've also come to that conclusion. And how could the substance of Prakriti be a product of the conscious Atma entities? Now, some people say, well, yes, consciousness manifests the world. But they don't. But they mean that is as an illusory world, as something which is just the content of conscious experience. That would not account for a real world. So the conscious Atmas could not be the actual source or cause of Prakriti itself. So the Atmas and Prakriti aren't products either of themselves or of one another. They both require an explanation of their origin. And really, that origin would have to be an origin that is common to both of them. Now, in our earlier discussions in part 2, when we looked at reality and ontology, we claimed that the different aspects of reality we kind of gave three functions. The functions of consciousness, of cognition, and of physical stuff. And we suggested at the time that that all of them were part of a bigger reality. And it's now time to explore that thing that I said we would come back to, that greater reality which encompasses these functions of consciousness, cognition, and physical stuff. We're going to look at it now in more detail. Let's put them together as this kind of bigger picture, represented here by the white cloud circle encompassing him. There's a statement in the Upanishads, Sarva Kalvidam Brahma, meaning that this bigger circle, the entirety of everything, is Brahman, and everything in it is Brahman, Atmas and Prakriti. And this might seem confusing, as we've used this term Brahman to describe the Atmas, and we've also used it to describe Prakriti. And now we're saying Brahman is the totality, this big circle around it all. So the total materiality, the total of reality that manifests all the universe, is considered to be a manifestation of Brahman. And so Brahman is understood to be the total energy stuff that is the basis for both consciousness of the Atmas and also the physical stuff of the universe. And we'll explain in a little bit how that, the technicalities of how that works. So the relationship between the Atmas and Prakriti is established because each has a relationship with its ontological parent or origin, Brahman. And because of this relationship, the Atmas are Brahman and Prakriti is also Brahman. But we've claimed that there are distinct differences in the functions and properties of these two components of Brahman reality, consciousness and Prakriti. How does this work? And that's explained by the variegatedness that exists within Brahman. Again, a statement from the Upanishads, Parasya Shaktir Vividaiva Shruyate, that the one reality possesses many energies which are described as diverse because of their various characteristics. Now, the term indicating Brahman in this text is para. The word para is singular in the genitive, it's possessive. So it refers to a singular, non-dual reality. But a non-dual reality that possesses many diverse energies, termed Shaktis. We'll be using that word regularly, Shaktis as energies. Now, actually this isn't unusual. Each of us as an individual entity have many Shaktis or energies, that might describe our talents and our abilities. For instance, I wish I could, but I might say I could sing or I could paint or ride a bicycle. So we have a long list of our Shaktis. And even a brick, and I've used the brick because of my architectural background, has many Shaktis. Its mass can weigh things down, its shape can be used to build walls, its colours and textures can make very nice aesthetics of brickwork, if you like that sort of thing. So if one physical object or one conscious being can possess and manifest many Shaktis, it's not unreasonable for Brahman to do the same. And in philosophical terms, the alternative doesn't hold up, for the same reason that we've discussed in previous weeks. Because if, as the Advaita monists claim, Brahman exists only with fixed, undifferentiated features, there could never be any variety of qualities. We would just have this, pure 100% undifferentiated Brahman. In this picture of reality, there's no scope for Prakriti, nor any scope for the individualized consciousness which is the hallmark of each one of us. Not now, not ever. So it's not a valid argument to suggest, as we quoted last week, that the individual Atmas all merge back into the oneness of Brahman. Because this theory contradicts itself by suggesting that perfect oneness can fool itself into being or thinking that it is many. Whether it is being many or whether it is thinking itself as many, it's contradicted its oneness, it's contradicted its undifferentiated state. So the conclusion must be that Brahman has the ability to manifest variegated qualities. Hence our concept of a single, non-dual reality that possesses variegated energies and is able to manifest these differentiated qualities. So that's a much more promising picture. And it gives us an idea of this totality of reality. And I'm going to use three descriptors. And I use this word descriptors because what we're just talking about now is beyond our ability to visualize. So we can only kind of offer rough ideas. But these three descriptors that seem to make up the concept of what we are talking about is Brahman as the source or emanating point of all energies. Simultaneously, Brahman as the manifested variegated components of those energies, and Brahman as the totality of all these components together. So to help clarify these kind of different descriptors and what they refer to, I'm now going to use the term Parabrahman to refer to the concept of Brahman as the source. So let's focus a little on this idea that all of Brahman has a source. A source we are calling the absolute truth, in the terms I mentioned at the start of this talk. Now, which means an absolute source or origin that ties all reality together. So I think it's a common feature when anyone tries to contemplate the scope of reality, whether you're coming from a scientific or a philosophical or just a casual interest point of view. We all hope to identify that there is one source or origin that gives rise to everything. I think that's a common platform on which to discuss concepts of absolute truth and what is the nature of that one thing that could be the origin of everything else. Now, for some, this idea of an absolute truth or absolute source could be Big Bang, and the idea of a single point from which the whole universe emerged. And I think many people have that as this kind of simplistic version of what is the source of everything. But as we kind of went through our analysis on cosmology, we saw that there must be even physical existence beyond the point of Big Bang. So both Big Bang and the notion of the multiverse, particularly, need a bigger absolute origin or kind of box to put them all in. Now, even if we disagree on what might be the specific origin of everything, so let's at least agree that there is such a source or origin, an absolute truth of some sort. And let's ask ourselves, what are the features that we might logically expect of this absolute truth? I think one of the first questions is, would the absolute truth be ultimately simple or ultimately complex? And I think that's a dividing line between human opinion. Those who favour a physicalist or reductionist approach would say that the origin of everything must be extremely simple. A single force, energy or law of physics, something you could print on the front of a t-shirt. And if that was the case, that gives rise to this sort of sequence, that the simple origin gives rise to the universe, we said it expands, and that then produces life forms and consciousness emerges in due course. So in this picture, a reductionist picture, complexity is a cumulative progression of information content from a source of absolute simplicity. Whereas a theory involving Brahman as the source postulates a complex origin, giving rise to the components of Brahman, consciousness and the Prakriti universe. Now, with any theory of ultimate origins, the question can be asked, where did this source come from? And that question might suggest to people that it's easier to postulate a very simple source appearing from nothing than a very complex source appearing from nothing. And that's because our minds think it's easier to manifest something simple out of nothing than something complex. But anything coming out of nothing is equally difficult, problematic, and actually irrational. It doesn't matter how simple or how complex that thing is supposed to be, the idea of ex nihilo, out of nothing, is faulty. There has to be a substrate of reality that can give rise to the manifested object, simple or complex. And then that substrate is the origin, not the later thing that is claimed to pop out of it. So the absolute truth cannot be something that has popped out of something else. It has to be what it is, always. And that applies however you look at your theory, whether it's in pure physicalist terms or anything else. So postulating that this source is highly simple doesn't answer the question of origins any more than if the origin is complex. And in fact, the problems start for the theory if the origin is extremely simple, because then you have to account for complexity. How does something infinitely simple give rise to everything else with all its complexity? Now, these issues of complexity apply to both theories, but let's see how the reductionist theory copes with them. Where does all the matter arise from? How does a simple star turn into so much stuff unless the potential for everything already existed within that starting stuff? In which case, it actually isn't that simple. And how does low information stuff become filled with so much information that specifies all of its new properties? Again, unless that information is somehow encoded within the absolute origin. Again, meaning that it is not that simple. This is the main issue for a simple origin, and the one that we have raised throughout all our fields of scientific study, that reductionist theories cannot adequately account for the information content that we already know exists in the things of this universe. Nor can reductionist theories explain how complex information develops within a system, other than to suggest and invoke a kind of non-scientific idea, chance. Now, we've discussed these type of questions in relationship to the issues of Big Bang theory, and the same apply however far back or beyond Big Bang you take the reductionist theory to try and identify an absolute origin of everything. So now let's consider the Parabrahman concept of ultimate complexity. This proposes that the potential for all substance and information contained within everything, in reality, already exists within a complex source. So all subsequent manifestations are specific portions of that complex potential. Now that resonates with our everyday experience. For instance, after this, I may want to go and cook dinner, and the particular vegetable dish that I cook tonight will be one possible outcome derived from the potential of all the vegetables and ingredients I have in my fridge and on the shelves. So, on a more technical example, we've talked about how the collapse of a quantum probability state is one possible outcome from that potential probability state. And this idea that the effect exists within the cause is consistent with the principle of, and we've used this phrase to describe this idea of Satkaryavad, that the effect exists as potential within the original cause. And I think many people are confused about this point and may not understand its importance and may not even appreciate its validity, because they see the finished product, like this bedside cabinet in the picture here, and they think, well, actually it has gained some new qualities that the raw materials didn't have. For instance, this cabinet has an overall shape. Didn't see that in the original wood. It's different. And it has drawers that have the function of opening up and you can store stuff in them. That wasn't there in the wood. And you can probably point out a few others. But to understand how this item, and indeed how all products or effects relate to their cause, we have to understand the various facets of causality. There is the material cause, the efficient or information cause, and the energetic cause. Now let me put information, material and energy here. Let me explain them. And we're going to use the example that we cited from Vedanta some time ago, the idea of the carpenter working the timber material with her tools. So the raw timber planks offer potential. The finished pieces of wood have to be possible. It's possible that they can be made from the potential of the carpenter's raw materials. She cannot produce a product that requires more timber than she has to work with. And in fact there will definitely be some waste and things not used. Not all of the original will be used. The material that will manifest this bedside cabin will be a portion of the original. And the efficient cause is the information and design that the carpenter imparts to the timber as she saws and chisels it. This design is a product from the greater potential of the carpenter's mind. It isn't that the design is all that she's got in her mind or is more than she's got in her mind. It cannot be more or different from it. And the energetic cause is the potential of the carpenter's arms and hands to act through her tools. Again, the end result is limited to whatever energy she can expend, and within the limitations of her skills that she engages, and within the potential capacity of her set of tools. So, our conclusion is that the finished product is an effect within the potential of the combination of these three facets of causality. So it is wrong to claim that the emergence of particular qualities or functions of a product simply because so those qualities appear to be more than the qualities of just one facet of causality. For instance, the shapes and functions of the drawers were all contained within the combined potential of the material, the design, and the ability of the carpenter and her tools. QED. The effect is always contained within the potential of its causation. And this is pertinent to the next question being raised. Is the absolute truth inert, meaning non-conscious, or is the absolute truth sentient or conscious? Let's consider the reductionist theory of a simple origin. Inert origin, indeed. We've already analysed the problems of explaining the existence and nature of consciousness in relation to anything we know in the physical universe. And the theory of an ultimately simple origin of everything relies on the appearance of matter and is developed into biological systems before it can talk about consciousness. So the simple model shown above doesn't seem to offer any plausible explanation of consciousness. And this, I think, is the key issue that tells us that the absolute truth cannot be something inert. If we have no way of explaining how consciousness might arise from an inert source, even regarding that inert source having produced biological bodies, human brains, and everything else, and we still can't explain consciousness, then we have no right to claim that the absolute truth might be a non-sentient thing. Now, the only adjustment to this figure that you could make to try and suggest a way around this is to say that the simple origin is itself the direct source of consciousness. But now you've got two other problems. One is to account for the substance and information content and complexity of matter, and the other is to explain how the distinct function or feature of consciousness emerges from a simple inert origin. Unless you are also suggesting that the simple origin possesses the ability to give rise to consciousness or is actually already conscious itself. And neither of those are comfortable suggestions for the physicalist or reductionist theories and actually contradict themselves. And really the implication that the source either gives rise directly to consciousness or is conscious itself means that the origin is neither simple nor inert. And in fact, really what has happened is we've concluded that we have to go with our other option, that the absolute truth is both sentient and is complex. So to sum this up, the reductionist concept of a simple and inert absolute truth is problematic. The origin of everything cannot be shown or logically justified as simple nor as inert, non-sentient. So I'm afraid we're going to have to give the reductionist concept of the absolute truth poor marks on these 2 points. The absolute truth, neither simple nor inert. Now consider the Parabrahman concept. By contrast, the conclusion we have reached throughout this series that consciousness cannot be reduced to either the simplicity of the properties of physics, nor to the supposedly even simpler state of any type of pre-cosmic matter substrate. This leads us to conclude that consciousness is a non-reducible feature of reality and a feature of the free state we call Brahman. And therefore, that Parabrahman, as the source of Brahman, is sentient on the basis of being sentient, is also complex. Now, we've relied heavily on the concept that the origin of something must contain the potential for everything that is produced from and by it. So the Vedanta idea is that the Parabrahman concept of the absolute truth is the source and origin of all facets of causality. To be the absolute truth of everything else, Parabrahman needs to be the material cause of everything. Everything is composed of the substance of Brahman emanating from Parabrahman. This means that any of the dependent components of Brahman, such as the conscious Atmas and the properties of Prakriti, the stuff that makes the universe, have their origin in Parabrahman and derive their qualities from the absolute and total qualities of Parabrahman. And we've already explained how many of the qualities that are contained within Prakriti have their origins as ideals within the free state of Brahman consciousness. And Parabrahman must also be the efficient cause. It possesses the knowledge and information that provides the potential for all dependent and subsequent knowledge and information. And to do that, Parabrahman would also require to be conscious. And we've given the argument. How can a component of Brahman, like the conscious individual Atma, possess a feature that is not available to its source, Parabrahman? Indeed, one might suggest that the consciousness of the Atma would be just a tiny fraction of the potential of the consciousness of Parabrahman. We may not even be able to conceive of the potency of such sentience. And it is the sentience of Parabrahman that allows it to be the original, efficient cause, the source of all information and capability to generate intention. And Parabrahman must also be the origin of all agency and energetic ability. Otherwise, it would also be said that the dependent components like the Atmas possess a power of agency not available to their source. That doesn't seem logical. Now, the Upanishads offer several analogies to help us conceive of this relationship of individual conscious entity, the Atma, and the origin of our existence, Parabrahman. One of them is like the idea of a single drop of water, from the ocean, has the same constitution of saltiness as the whole ocean. But the drop of water is tiny and dependent on the ocean for its existence. Or the idea of sparks produced from a fire. The sparks possess similar fiery qualities. They give off heat and light. But the potency of that heat and light is tiny compared to the fire itself. And in fact, the sparks really exist within and are part of that whole fire. But they rely on the proximity to the fire to retain the qualities that they share with the fire. They are dependent on the origin of the source of fire and the whole of the fire. So the conclusion is that even the individuality as subject enjoyers enjoyed by the Atmas, you and me, must also have its origin in Parabrahman. So these are the kind of, we had this chart of the nine different qualities of consciousness in the free state. And here they are also attributed to Parabrahman. Parabrahman is conscious, absolutely conscious. It's non-temporal. It has individual consciousness and has total and is absolutely cognizant. It is the source of its own will. And if there are forms in the free state and the Atmas can perceive them, so can Parabrahman. And if the individual Atmas manifest their form to engage in serving activities, it follows that Parabrahman must also manifest as its own form to reciprocate relationships. And that could be interesting. In short, Parabrahman can also be described using the essential nature that we talked about regarding the Atmas. The idea that the Atmas are Sat. Now, Chit, Ananda and Vigraha. Now, we talk about these, but there is a difference of potency and a difference of excellence that we cannot imagine. So, in that case, Parabrahman would be Sat, the foundation of all knowledge. And it would be Chit, and the omniscient source of all knowledge. It would be Ananda, the center and focus of all loving exchanges, relationships and pleasure. And Vigraha, the most exquisite form of all beauty and enchantment. Alright, so those are just some of the features we might expect of our Parabrahman concept of the Absolute Truth. Let's think a little about the relationship of Parabrahman with the other facets of Brahman and Prakriti reality. How does this source relate to its emanations, the other components? It's said that Parabrahman is beyond logic, meaning that it is beyond our ability to infer during our limited knowledge of this world. But even though the concept of Parabrahman is beyond logic, it should not be illogical. So I'm going to try and describe the relationship of Parabrahman with its emanations, with the other features, by relying on the statements and insights from Vedanta. But at the same time, we're not just accepting them blindly, we are posing questions and considering if this whole picture that Vedanta describes holds together. Is it a consistent, self-consistent model? Now, to keep things simple for this session, I'm just going to focus on two key components, the ones we've talked about, the Atmas and Prakriti. So let's start with the Atmas. It's explained that the source Parabrahman expands itself as diverse manifestations of its own consciousness. These are Svanksha, expansions of the original consciousness of Parabrahman. These are the same personages as the original Parabrahman, but they exhibit different features and aspect of personality. So we're talking now about Parabrahman rather than the Atmas. So this ties in with the principle that even in this physical universe, we all want to enjoy incredible variety of experience and expression. We'll go anyway, we'll do anything in order to get that. Similarly, these Svanksha expansions of Parabrahman, which are all Parabrahman itself, fulfill these objectives of enjoying unlimited experience and expression. Now, these Svanksha expansions manifest different forms and features to suit the unlimited extent of relationships that Parabrahman enjoys with all existence, and particularly with the relationships with the other Atmas in free consciousness. But also from Parabrahman emanates something more, the totality of all Atma entities. These have, as we said, a modicum of the aspects of it has the full aspects of individuality and a modicum of the features of Parabrahman. And these Atmas, like you and me, are called Vibhinangsha, meaning that they are produced from Parabrahman as our source, but we enjoy a sense of our own distinctive selfhood, our individuality. So the selfhood of the Atma is an ontologically permanent feature of our existence. The Atma is eternally an individual Vibhinangsha entity. And the interactions of us Atmas in the free state is mediated by another emanation from Parabrahman. Now this is a Shakti referred to as the Antaranga Shakti, often translated as the internal potency coming from Parabrahman. So the role of the internal potency is to mediate the intentions expressed by the Atmas in relationship to both Parabrahman and the other Atmas. And I mention this because it's going to help us understand how Parabrahman relates to the other component of reality, i.e. Prakriti. Now, Prakriti seems to be very different to Parabrahman. You know, Parabrahman and the Atmas, we've said, share so many features together. But Prakriti seems very different to both the Atmas and to what Parabrahman is. And because Prakriti isn't sentient, it's formless unless form is imposed upon it. So, is it still Brahman? Yes, Prakriti is Brahman, but it is not a transformation of ordinary Brahman, if you like. Meaning, if Brahman is already manifest in some other feature as Brahman, that does not change into Prakriti. Brahman as a principle never changes its status. Now, according to the analysis that Jiva Goswami offers, and I'm particularly fond of his kind of presentation, Prakriti is manifest from the transformation of a specific Shakti or emanation directly from Parabrahman. And this emanation from Parabrahman itself is the Bahiranga Shakti. So the Bahiranga Shakti isn't a transformation of any other aspect of Brahman. It is directly manifest from Parabrahman. Bahiranga Shakti, or the external potency. Here we have it. So it is this external potency that then provides the material we call pradhana, which absorbs the chittam, the consciousness emanating, the material kind of related consciousness emanating from the Atmas who want to enjoy it, and then becomes activated as the Mahatattva and produces the realms that we call the Prakriti universes. So just as the internal potency is its own Shakti emanation from Parabrahman, the external potency is another Shakti emanation. And the external potency has its own particular attributes. Unlike the internal Shakti, the external Shakti manifests itself as the non-sentient dravya, or material that ultimately makes up Prakriti. And whereas the internal potency is itself sentient and dynamically participative in facilitating the pure intentions of the free Atmas, the external energy is a system, a facility designed to handle the intentions of conditioned Atmas. And it kind of acts, and I hope I'm not being offensive when I say this, it kind of acts as a sponge, soaking up the mostly our self-centered desires and aspirations of all the Atmas in this world, and accommodates them along the lines that we discussed when we talked about the VR gaming analogy. Our desires are noted, they are categorized in terms of their guna combinations, they are prioritized, our desires and intentions are queued and then set in motion according to the kind of big data algorithms crunched by karma. And then the gunas activate, once something is activated, it activates prakriti matter to manifest the circumstances and events that we encounter within this kind of cosmic reality game. Now, in this Sandarbha Diva Goswami has provided quite a bit more detailed technical information about how all this works. It's beyond the scope of this session. But the essence is that the big Brahman picture suggests two major ways of accommodating the desires of the Atmas, via the mediation of the external potency in the realm of Prakriti, or via the mediation of the internal Shakti in the realm of free state consciousness. Now, to sum up what we've discussed about Brahman, and for this I'm kind of grateful for the research and input of Shivananda Sharma, my friend, there is exactly one fundamental reality. The principle we have termed Brahman. And this Brahman in its feature as the original, the origin of existence rather, is Parabrahman. And it is, to use this philosopher's phrase, subject conscious. This means that it is itself a subjectively individual conscious entity. And we have termed this concept of the origin as an individual conscious entity, Parabrahman. Next, the Atmas themselves are individual subject conscious entities, but they are essentially grounded in Brahman. That means that they are an emanation of Parabrahman and manifest to some degree the qualities of Parabrahman, and they are part of the whole sphere of Brahman existence. Atmas manifest the full scope of the features of Satchitananda Vigraha. But in comparison, Prakriti is contingently grounded. Now what this means is it is a transformation of a specific Shakti emanation from Parabrahman. It is Brahman, but it doesn't manifest features of Satchitananda Vigraha. It is Brahman, but not a change in Brahman. It is a transformation of a particular potency from Parabrahman. Now, although Prakriti is eternal, and is a real aspect of overall Brahman reality, it is a form of reality that is contingent on the intentions of those Atmas who wish to play away from the free state. The transformation of this potency into Prakriti provides those Atmas with the sort of virtual conditioned illusions of life within Prakritic universes. So, now, often this whole setup of Prakriti and its manifestation, the universe and everything we experience within it, is called Maya, which sometimes translates as energy and sometimes translates as illusion, or that which is not. And certainly the Prakriti universe of Maya produces in the Atmas, like ourselves, the experience, illusory experiences, although the manifestations and the Maya itself are real. Now, an example given is that we have the real experience of water, and in hot weather we might see the refraction of light from the sky bending upwards towards us from a distant point. And that's the physics behind what we experience as a mirage. Excuse me. Our minds recall the real impression that we've had in the past of real water. And we think, oh, this way I'm seeing now means there's water up ahead. What we are seeing is real. It's a real effect of light. And the memory of seeing real water is also real. The illusion is that we confuse ourselves into thinking we're seeing something that is not it is not something that It is not what we think it is, rather. So Jiva Goswami suggests there's another way of translating Maya that better conveys its kind of role. Maya is derived from the word miyate, which means that which produces variety. And I think that definition, it helps us understand the objective of both the internal and external energies, as they both develop the variety of forms, activities that give the Atmas their range of experiences. The internal potency does that in reality as conscious stuff, and the external energy produces the forms that we believe have a certain reality when we experience it. This concept of a single unified reality that contains this variegatedness of energies is described rather beautifully in the invocation mantra of the Isha Upanishad. It goes like this: Om Purnam Adah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. That the complete whole is perfect and complete. And because it is completely perfect, all emanations from that source, such as this phenomenal world, are also perfectly equipped as complete and whole components of reality. Whatever is produced of and manifest within the complete whole is also complete in itself. And because the source and the complete whole are non-different, even though so many complete units, such as the innumerable conscious Atmas, emanate from the source, both the source and the complete whole remain perfect and in balance. This completeness within the interrelationship of the source, the components of emanation, and the whole is very hard for us to grasp, because we're so conditioned in our concepts of time and causality in the physical world. Our understanding of this finite nature of physical objects is that if you take something away from an object, it is diminished. If you add something to it, there's more than you had. But the Vedas try to kind of give us a very rough example of how to understand something in this, how something that really no example in this world can convey. It suggests, think of how if you have one lit candle, you can light a whole group of other lights. And there's no limit to how many other candles you can light. So another invocation mantra, this time from the Brahma Samhita, offers us further insights into the nature of Parabrahman. Ishvara Paramah Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. All of these words are in the same nominative case in the Sanskrit language. They all refer to the subject, who is termed Ishvara Parama. Ishvara is a lovely word for Parabrahman because it conveys the idea of a circle, that entity which is the centre and the whole entire circle of Brahman. Everything is contained within and because of that absolute Ishvara. Now, we see this word Ishvara referred to others who may see themselves as being the centre of their own spheres of existence. And this might include our own outlook in life, because this is my kind of view of myself. Yep, as a matter of fact, the world does revolve around me. So, and this is natural for us because we're little sparks of the big fire. We share many of the attributes of Parabrahman. If Parabrahman is the centre of absolutely everything, then we might think, I'd also like to be the centre. Or maybe not of everything, but at least of the world that I can control and influence. And perhaps wishing to exercise that mentality is the impetus for taking us into conditioned life within Prakriti. Because the Prakriti universe offers that kind of virtual experience of being Ishvaras and believing that the world does in fact revolve around me. But the text talks of the Ishvara Parama, the supreme, that Ishvara who is responsible for it all. And then it offers a beautiful name for this entity, the source, the centre and totality of everything, Krishna. This is a name that implies and emphasizes the sentient, subjective and personal nature of Parabrahman. It enables us to identify the source of our existence in the personhood of an ultimate and absolute entity called Krishna. And this name, Krishna, indicates that this personage is imbued with all the features that we as sentient Atmas find utterly captivating. If in this world we find ourselves drawn to those who are beautiful, wise, powerful, famous, renounced or opulent, then by the name Krishna, these texts suggest that everything we could possibly find attractive or enchanting or fulfilling is present in absolute perfection and completeness in the personhood of Parabrahman Krishna. Now this point is further reinforced by stressing the nature of Parabrahman, as we previously mentioned, as the exquisite embodiment of eternal existence, omniscience and pleasure, Sat Chitananda Vigraha. Now, the next bit addresses this question, what produced Parabrahman? But this is a silly question, because Parabrahman is without beginning. Time, as we think of it, does not exist in the finite world of Prakriti, nor does the type of causality that we believe one thing causes another. Now, we are conditioned to think that things need to have a start in time. And these misconceptions of how things should be have no relevance beyond Prakriti. And the text simply states that Parabrahman has no beginning or origin because it is the beginning, and the whole of Brahman in itself is the ever-present origin of all existence. So the text finishes that Parabrahman is Sarva Karana Karanam, the cause of all causes. You and I, as individual Atmas, are causal agents. And if Parabrahman is the cause and of the existence of all the Atmas, then logically Parabrahman would also be the cause, and would be the cause then of all other causal entities like ourselves. So at this point, I'd like to take stock of the deliberations that we've had over these last, 35 sessions. We began with our pre-philosophical intuitions, our convictions that I exist as the persistent witness of my experiences. And we took these realizations to be axioms upon which to build our philosophical framework. And these led us to conclude that consciousness may be a distinct, fundamental feature of reality. And this perspective offered us a new way of thinking about our interaction as conscious entities within this world, including our relationship that we have with our body and with our mind. And it opened up new insights in the world of metaphysics, which we applied to biology and this phenomenon we call life. And this broader understanding of consciousness, matter and life allowed us to address the mysteries of the universe, where it came from and what's it for. But it has also taken us beyond the world we know and suggested that as things of consciousness, we may be like gamers, immersed in the deceptive reality of being embodied in biological avatars. And that the natural extrapolation of understanding ourselves as non-temporal conscious beings is the intriguing possibility that there might be a realm of consciousness in its free state, a realm that we can access, and maybe where we belong. So in these last two sessions, we have tried to continue that extrapolation using some of the concepts left to us by previous explorers of this quest. And this is where we have arrived. The idea that I am a non-temporal conscious entity with the ability to engage in physical existence within this universe, and also I have the ability of tiring from this never-ending video game with its lack of actual fulfillment. I have the option of enjoying my consciousness freed from the constraints and limitations of this cosmic game. And from there seems to be a simple progression. Because we're not alone in this free state. We share our existence and also our aspirations and our natural eagerness for enjoyment and fulfillment with all the other free Atmas. And also, a new factor we introduced this week is that we also share this in our dependent connection with Parabrahman. So this prerogative of free consciousness entails exercising unbridled intention in our interactions with others. And it suggested that we do this using Vigraha, the form of consciousness, a form that matches our intentions to offer service and enhance the enjoyment and pleasure of others, and particularly of Parabrahman. And there's so many descriptions recorded by the various sages and meditators of all the fun activities that consciousness gets up to. And they call these Leela, pleasure pastimes, activities that have no requirement or obligation for them to be done. They're not like domestic chores of this world. They have none of the feelings of, do I have to? They are acts of love. Now already in this world we have the experience that something we do out of love is never a chore. And we also know and feel that the greatest joy we experience is when we do something special for someone we love. And these feelings are indications of the real nature of the Atma as a loving entity, and suggest just an inkling of the incredible thrill and happiness that consciousness is capable. A heightened state of exhilaration which is derived from these loving interactions, a state referred to by the sages as rasa. Now, this description is far beyond anything we as philosophers can come up with. I mention them here to indicate the possibilities that might exist for consciousness. We have invited you in as consciousness explorers. This isn't just an invitation to think about your thinking or to contemplate existence, or what we mean by consciousness. That's how we started. But this exploration is starting to open doors that are far beyond our vision and imagination. And I'd like you to be excited by this exploration and by the possibilities, because if anything we've said in these sessions is true, then they can be discovered and experienced by you directly. In this regard, I want to introduce you to two characters. Buffy, the larger dog on the right, and Malibu. They're all family dogs, both now moved on in their journey of reincarnation. They had very different personalities. Now, if Malibu, the little one, heard sounds or saw pictures of animals coming from the television, she would look up and bark at them. Whereas Buffy never reacted to anything on the television. She was confused why Malibu was making all this fuss. Here's a question to you. Which dog was more intelligent? Was it the dog that was able to identify the animals on the TV and could relate to them as real? Or the dog that was unconcerned about the imagery and sounds coming out of a box? Now, perhaps we shouldn't say that one outlook is more intelligent than another. But certainly, even these two dogs use their intelligences differently. And I think we humans are like that. Some humans are completely wrapped up in the reality of this world, and they're expert at studying how it works and how to improve it. Others seem less invested in the ephemeral nature of the world, and although they may live in it, they're more interested in engaging with that which might be real and lasting. And really, this example of the two dogs is my domestic version of Plato's cave. If you're not familiar with this, it's an allegory used by Plato. And so here in the diagram in the picture, in this area circled in red, we have several people watching the flickering shadows of objects projected onto the cave wall. These poor characters could spend their entire existence captivated by these shadows. They don't realize what it's all happening thanks to the fire encircled in yellow that generates the light, and also by these guys circled in blue. These in blue, these are the puppet showmen who carry various objects on their sticks as they pass along the path behind the cave. In this way, the shadows are forever changing, and they keep the viewers continually, permanently captivated. It takes someone new coming into the cave and saying, look, these shadows, there's something more than that that's going on. And perhaps some of these guys might say, well, maybe there is something more than these shadows. Maybe there is a greater reality that we could explore beyond the shadows, outside of the cave. So in the same way, the findings of the Atma Paradigm suggest that there may be far more for us to explore and far more reality available to us if we think more deeply about the shadows and ideas that we have taken as the all in all. Now, the Atma Paradigm doesn't ask you to accept any idea or concept that you cannot prove to yourself. It is intended to be a philosophical framework based on sound scientific evidence and developed by rational logic and inference. And it supports and is supported by several key processes of personal discovery that will enable our own consciousness to see things more clearly and directly. And let me just mention very briefly, and three that I think could be of help if you want to develop yourself as a consciousness explorer and discover more things for yourself. The first is lifestyle engineering, if we can call it that, using our knowledge of the three gunas, the modes of nature. We noted that these modes have an effect on human psychology. Therefore, if we wish to develop our ability to see clearly, to reason well, and to be open to deeper insights, we should be careful what modes we associate with and what we allow ourselves to be influenced by. Now, the Yoga Sutras give the example that seeing under the influence of sattva or lucidity is like seeing to the bottom of a deep pool, because the pool of the mind is placid and clear. Whereas when we're under the influence of rajas, agitated energy, the mind is a pool with ripples and waves on the surface and turbulence of eddies below. So it's hard to see clearly through it. And when we're under the effect of tamas or dullness, the pool of the mind is just cloudy and muddy. Not much is visible through it. So Vedanta stresses that to transform how we think and how we see reality, it's important to increase and encourage more sattva in our lives, more clarity. And that can be achieved through considering how we behave, what we expose our senses to, what we eat, all the things we do, what we hear. And another approach, another process is authentic action. This is action that is in keeping with our core convictions. Now, we all have different senses, different identities. Many of our identities are based on our relationships. I'm a parent, a spouse, a child, and so on. Or it's to do with my work and my skills. I'm a teacher, I'm a plumber, I'm a doctor. Or skills, I'm good at cooking, I can entertain, I'm empathetic, whatever. All these identities involve relationships and responsibilities within those relationships to other people. And if we are to be true to these identities and these responsibilities, we need to act in a particular way to serve the interests of those persons. So, for instance, if I claim to be a teacher, to be true to that identity, I must serve the interests of students by imparting knowledge to them. Such authenticity of action is the basis of this concept of Dharma. Dharma is not about moral codes handed down from above. It's about being true and authentic to our own responsibilities, what we define as our responsibility to serve the interest, well-being and happiness of others, according to the identity that I believe about myself. So making decisions on the basis of Dharma resets our consciousness from being egocentric, thinking primarily of ourselves, to being alter-centric, thinking of others. And actually acting true to Dharma is very clever, because it aligns our current intentions in the here and now. It aligns those sort of intentions with the trusted quality of the intentions of consciousness in its free state. It's a way of aligning ourselves with the consciousness of the free state. And the third process that I see as beneficial is yoga. Now, you'll have guessed by how much I presented on the Yoga Sutras that I'm suggesting that this is more than just getting fit at the local Hatha yoga class at your leisure centre. Although I'm not saying that won't help. Now, there are many benefits and objectives claimed for the various yoga processes. In the context of the Atma Paradigm, I think the most important aspect is that the yoga practice orientates our sense of self to that of being a conscious entity, the Atma, and particularly develops our sense of self to understanding our identity and the responsibility of authentic action of the Atma in its relationship with Ishvara, Parabrahman, or Krishna. Now, the Vedic culture offers many different yoga and enlightenment systems, and the texts like Bhagavad Gita explain that these processes cannot be said to have achieved their objective until they develop into the yoga of active relationship with Parabrahman. Each type of yoga uses a different facet of our mind and body, such as our outward activities of our thoughts and intentions, and it tries to orientate or engage that facet for the practitioner, so the practitioner becomes themselves directed towards the ultimate platform of free consciousness. I'm not going to give a complete analysis of all the yoga systems here, just to quickly indicate what's available and what each tries to do for the practitioner. For instance, Karma Yoga asks the practitioner to engage his or her activities in charity, service to others, and in dedication to an authority beyond oneself. Tyaga involves a person undergoing extreme physical deprivation and disciplines. And in this way, the Tyagi, the renunciate, denies the senses, the gratification of ordinary life, but also indulges in actually quite painful sensory activities, like sitting amongst 4 blazing fires in the midday sun. By doing these sort of things, they try to realign the mind away from sensory pleasure towards internal thinking. Now, just to be clear, Atma Paradigm isn't suggesting you need to do that. Then the next type is for those interested in Jnana Yoga. They engage their mind in intellectual and philosophical pursuit. They're trying to develop the mental understanding of the reality of free consciousness. They're trying to understand what is the heart of all existence, what is Brahman. And the Gita suggests that that's very, very difficult for anyone, let alone humans today with all the distractions and complications we have in modern life. And then there's meditative Ashtanga Yoga. And that works just as if Jnana works on the mind, then intellectual mind, but yoga works on the buddhi, the discriminative aspect of the cognitive functions. And the 8 limbs described by Patanjali are a progression of drawing awareness from the outer world and aligning it with the inner world of meditation. Buddhi, this discriminative function, as we've described in earlier sessions, controls the flow of thoughts, impressions and emotions from the pool of mind to the theatre of our awareness. And the idea is that by using buddhi, we gradually our attention and absorption is drawn away from the sensory objects, and also diminishes the power of the senses to demand and to distract the mind. And the mind becomes ever more capable of being filled with the desired object of the yogi's meditation. So as buddhi dominates the mind, it then shines a light to reveal to the yogi the actual status of the yogi as Atma, an entity of free consciousness. So within the practice of Ashtanga, all the purposes of karma, tyaga and jnana are achieved, but it's still not easy for modern folk like us. And then there is bhakti. This is the path of wise love and devotion. This involves the reorientation of our sense of relational identity. In bhakti, the practitioner really is working on the ahankara. Of course, this is something for the Atma, but actually what we are working on within the practice is the ahankara. The persona aspect of cognitive functions. Now, you can see how these different processes involve a facet of our mental and physical coverings, but coming closer and closer to the actual nature of the Atma. So the ahankara is the most subtle and difficult aspect of the coverings of consciousness. It's the hardest one for us to transcend, and that's why the other processes struggle, because they're overshadowed by the strength of the Atma's conviction about their persona as being a physical body and mind. But the system of bhakti, as outlined in the Gita, suggests that this same point explains why bhakti is the easiest process of all, because bhakti just involves the practitioner reorientating its sense of identity, reorientating our identity with that of being a conscious entity. We are the Atma, and thinking of the Atma and our identity as engaged in the active relationship with Parabrahman, just as if we were in the state of free consciousness. So we're actually aligning our identity with the free state. And then with this core concept in meditation, all the other aspects fall in line. Our buddhi falls in line, our mind is controlled, our senses are kind of regulated. So the bhakti practitioner naturally engages their activities, their use of their senses and their intellectual curiosity and their mind, their intelligence, all to reflect a loving relationship that they aspire to have with Parabrahman. So as we continue on this kind of great journey of life, we've got many choices and options. How best to use this life? What should we be aiming for? And our analysis supports the contention of the Vedic text that there may be many different options or states of existence for the Atmas. Now, out of which I'm going to talk about 4 key objectives for the consciousness explorer, options for the consciousness explorer. Let me refer to them as samsara, voidist, monist, and bhakti. Let's see what each has to offer. First, samsara. This is conditioned life in the physical universe. This is what we've got at the moment. This offers the Atma, the semblance of existence, but with fear of mortality. It offers partial awareness and understanding. It offers drips of pleasure mixed with times of pain. And a physical body. Yes, we have a form, a physical body with its limited abilities and lifespan. So the ticks are there for each of Sat, Chit, Ananda and Vigra, but in darkened format. They're not properly manifest. Next is the voidist option. This offers the Atma, if they want, to practically negate its sense of existence. And this might be attractive to those Atmas tired of samsara and who then develop no other wish than to effectively extinguish their consciousness. Perhaps as Atmas they could never stop existing, but it may feel to them that they have. Then there's the monist option. This offers the chance for Atmas to escape samsara and remain within the scope of Brahman. They experience themselves at one with the quality of the energy enveloping them. They are unaware of any distinction between themselves and any other conscious entity. This is freedom from samsara and also a state of experiencing pure eternal existence within kind of Brahman. And it's described as an unimaginable state of never-ending bliss. But it's also described as bliss without the additional aspects of the interrelationships with other consciousness and without a connection and relationship with Parabrahman. So it gets a tick, but it's not a full tick. So much greater than anything that can be expressed in samsara, but still it doesn't have the full scope of enjoyment and pleasure that is available to the bhakti experience. This is said to offer the fulfillment of the full reach of our experience as Atmas in terms of eternal conscious nature, awareness and cognition, and the indescribable pleasures of the loving exchanges of rasa, enjoyed in our relationship and activities with Parabrahman, Krishna. So for the consciousness explorer, this is the one that has the most available to it. And seeing what is available, where we could be, and how we could just let our lives kind of slide past, I think this creates a responsibility on us to consider how best to use the time, intelligence and talents that we have, and determine what objectives we wish to apply ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to be like poor Alice wandering about in Wonderland. She's lost in the woods and then meets the Cheshire Cat. She asks him, "What path should I take?" But the Cheshire Cat replies, "Well, where do you want to go to?" She says, "Well, I don't know." Then says the Cheshire Cat, "It doesn't matter which path you take." Or to quote George Harrison from one of his later songs, "If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there." I think it's the role of science and philosophy to help understand where we're trying to get to and enable us to choose which road and path we wish to take. And in this session, I presented many concepts and processes that are beyond what we can really confirm by third-party evidence, testimony, or even the logic that we've tried to quote. You have to discover the mysteries of consciousness and its access for higher free states for yourself. I have mentioned them here because they seem to be consistent with all the scientific evidence and logical that we've discussed. And they suggest that each of us has this potential for utilizing the expression of our consciousness for the delight of Parabrahman and the other Atmas, and immersing ourselves in the pastimes of Leela and the delights of rasa, loving exchanges. Now, all of this might seem a long way off, but here is an encouraging message that comes from my own home country, Ireland. You're travelling in Ireland, you kind of feel you're lost. You come to this junction. You got no idea which road to take. Luckily, there's someone there that you can ask for directions. "Excuse me, sir, how do I get to Killarney?" "Ah, no," he replies. "If I was you, I wouldn't start from here." And that, of course, is our permanent situation. We always have to start our journey, wherever we're trying to go to, we have to start our journey from where we are now. But as they say, even the longest journey starts with a single step. Now, I hope this presentation of the Atma Paradigm has been helpful to you. We've tried to offer a perspective on existence, life and reality, something that is a refreshing alternative and has great benefits over the physicalist narrative. And excuse me while I just conclude this whole series with a short kind of comparison as a final summary. The Atma Paradigm, importantly, fulfills our pre-philosophical intuitions. If it did not achieve and was consistent with our axioms, then we would have had to go back and look at the whole thing. It is also consistent with scientific data and evidence. It's not asking science to be thrown out. It's saying the evidence is there, but you will better understand it from the view of consciousness being a fundamental aspect of reality. So, consistent with scientific data. That's not always true of the physicalist narrative, as we've shown. It explains all the observed phenomena within the scientific data, not just the easy physical ones, but also other valid observations that science has considered anomalous and beyond science. The Atma Paradigm can account for and incorporate those as well. It is philosophically rational. Unlike the interpretations that rely on concepts of chance and other non-causal ideas and emergent properties. These can't be tested or observed, whereas the Atma Paradigm offers causal explanations that have the potential for testability, but it is testability that you must engage in yourself. It aligns with the values, the ethics and the sense of purpose that are at the heart of human aspiration. And that also is not true or available within the physicalist narrative. And it offers a pathway to deeper realizations and to perhaps evolved states of conscious experience that we have been discussing today in our relationship with Brahman and Parabrahman. Well, you have now made it through to the end of this webinar series. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's even inspired you in some way. Congratulations if you've completed all 35 sessions. I wish I had your contact details, and because you definitely deserve some sort of certificate. But as my dad would say when I asked for money for passing exams, knowledge is a reward in itself. Now, it is the end of this series, but rather it's really only the beginning stages of the development of this material of the Atma Paradigm. The Atma Paradigm is not fixed in stone. It constantly needs and is being updated and improved as new insights and discoveries can come to life. And it's a product of an incredible array of wonderful minds, all contributing in their own way according to their skills, their knowledge and backgrounds. And if you want to be part of this initiative or just want to keep in touch, please contact us through the email or through the Atma Paradigm Yoga channel. And it's now time to roll the credits. That, once again, thank you for viewing this series. I'd like first of all to kind of offer my appreciation to T. Krishna Cymru, which is our local ISKCON centre here in Cardiff, for commissioning the series, and particularly my deep thanks to Mantri Raj, aided by Kaylee Kanana, for looking after all the technical matters each week. And deep thanks to our review team, Jayadvaita Swami, Bob Cohen, Vishaka Devi, Ryan Bissett, Shivananda Sharma, Sudharma, Krishnapriya and others, who are meeting up so many weeks on Zoom to discuss and critique and offer feedback and improvements for each session over the past 8 months. And the one thing they said is make it shorter, which I have absolutely not done today. I thank them for their amazing commitment and extraordinary wisdom, for all the feedback and encouragement, for which I'm really grateful. As I said, the Atma Paradigm has been developed over many years with the wonderful inputs of brilliant minds. And I must mention specifically the team of the Science and Philosophy Initiative formed here in the UK. And they include Dr. Ryan Bissett, Dr. Kunal Muli, Dr. Vaibhava Tiwari, Dr. Jasmine Jakubowski, and Dr. Dishant Sharma, Dr. Shashi Mukhi, Dr. Pradyumna Sepulveda, Kumar Grant, and many others who've attended our workshops in person and also online over all these years. All their contributions have been valuable. And also the encouragement and input over the years from Shonika Rishi and his scholars at the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies. But I have to say, our work to develop the aims of the SPI and the Atma Paradigm really took off when we formed collaboration with the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies based in Gainesville, USA. And each of the BIHS team have been so instrumental in developing the content for this series, personally and through, of course, all the events, conferences and workshops that they organise. So my deep thanks and appreciation to the BIHS gang. Special mentions, my friends Bob Cohen, Thomas Chapa, Dr. Mauricio Garrido, Prishni Sutton, Dr. Jonathan Banks and Joshua Green, and many others connected to the ongoing collaborative work of the BIHS. And I look forward to continuing all our sessions. I must thank the BBT for their funding and support of the BI conferences and workshops and continuing work with the BIHS that I've benefited from, and also from assisting in my service here in the UK. Thanks also to the TOVP, the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, to the exhibits team for also supporting and sponsoring workshops and research, and for the inclusion of aspects of the Atma Paradigm within the planned exhibits of the West Wing of the TOVP. We have to thank our philosophical team, featuring Dr. Howard Resnick, Dr. Ricardo Silvestre, Shivananda Sharma and Dr. Dragana Jagusic for all our incredible discussions that we've been having. To our Yoga Sutra team, led by Dr. Graham Schweig, Kenneth Solomon and Thomas Chapa. And I've also benefited enormously from the translations and of the commentaries to the Yoga Sutras provided by Dr. Edwin Bryant. And also to our literary group, Bhagavad-Shraya, Pranada Kamtwa and Visheshika. And to all the professors and scholars in research I have borrowed things from over the years, with particular mention to David Moorhouse of RV Technologies and to Brenda Dunn and the work of Pear with the late Robert John. I know I haven't covered everyone to whom I'm indebted, and there are so many other individuals who have influenced the work and who I owe my gratitude to. But I must acknowledge how I was particularly inspired by the original and some of the early members of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, who I've got to meet, discuss with, and even participate with as a junior over the years. These were Sadaputa Das, Dr. Richard L. Thompson, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Swami, Dr. Thuradam D. Singh, B.V. Nemi Swami, Brahmatirtha, Michael Cremo, Sanjay Das and Henk Kalman, all of whom inspired me to explore the relationship of science and Vedanta philosophy. Particularly, I must acknowledge that the thesis of the Atma Paradigm is built upon what I learned from Richard Thompson regarding the nature of consciousness and the role of information theory. Now, I asked if you wanted to be part of the project. Don't let this list of incredibly eminent personalities with such excellent qualifications put you off wanting to help this project. There's a place for everyone's contribution. Finally, and most importantly, I offer my deepest gratitude to the kindness of my spiritual master, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, without whom I would know nothing, and without whom the wisdom of Vedanta, Sankhya and Yoga would remain hidden and mysterious to human society. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. So, thank you very much for being part of this process of the Atma Paradigm, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Hare Krishna.